everybody ready? Good morning. Welcome to, are you ready, Paula? Okay, sorry. I'll back up. Ready, Paul? Good morning. Welcome to the September 17th Design Review, Downtown Design Review Committee. First item on my agenda is to turn off my phone. If everyone would follow suit, that'd be great. And we need roll call.
Betsy Grunstetter.
Present.
Gigi Faulkner.
Present.
Charles Ainsworth.
Present.
Corey Bates.
Present.
Connie Scothorn. Richard Tannenbaum.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Great. I assume that everyone has had a chance to peruse the minutes, and if I could get a motion and second on the minutes. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? There are no cases withdrawn. There are no continuance requests. There are no items on the consent docket. The first item for individual consideration is 601 Robert S. Kerr. Is the applicant present? Why don't we move this one to
move it to the end. The applicant is not here.
the end of the docket. Okay. Item B, 523 South Robinson Avenue. Is the applicant present? This is
This is the Film Exchange building and the building just north of it that were heard last time, and were continued for...
We almost lost you, David.
Sorry.
I am going to recuse myself for this item, so I will be stepping out. I'll be back.
Good morning. I'm David Todd. I'm with the City of Oklahoma City. I'm the program manager for the MAPS office. I think it was just mentioned that this is an item that was briefly heard last month, and I apologize, we didn't do a real good job of providing you all the background and everything that's going on with the park and the project. So today we hope to remedy that and bring you a lot of information and give you context for this case. So today we have Mary Margaret Jones, who's with Hargraves and Associates, who is our consultant for the park. And she is here to give you an update and educate you on what's been going on with the park. So I'd like to invite her up to the podium.
Thank you, David.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here. So I'll start with a sort of overview of the park and then talk about some of the issues specific to the Film Exchange building, and then some of the history and how we got to where we are today. So let's see if this was going to, yep. So I think you're all familiar with the Downtown MAPS Park and the great opportunity it is to create a great urban park in the heart of Oklahoma City, and to realize a vision that's been held for a long time by many people, Corridor Shore Plan, et cetera, of extending the city to the river. What you're seeing in this image is the upper park. We are now proceeding with design of the lower park as well, which will make that link to the river. And you can see the major components of the park are, well, right off the bat, you see the oval, the Great Lawn, on which we can host very large events, up to 20,000 people, the kind of venue that doesn't exist in downtown and for which there is a great demand. It has a stage, a covered stage. You see a major opportunity for art at the corner of Robinson and the Boulevard. You see the promenade, which is the major feature that connects from downtown to the Skydance Bridge. Finally, Skydance Bridge will have a connection, and that promenade will continue all the way to the river. I think the next big feature that you probably see is the lake, and this is something that really harkens back to the history of recreation and parks in Oklahoma City. Water is often very much a part of those parks and history in Oklahoma City. So being able to row a boat on a lake or walk on a bridge over the lake. There's a great civic fountain on Robinson, interactive fountain, small part for kids and a big part for kids of all ages. There's a cafe, urban gardens on the boulevard, and then throughout the park, woodlands. And this is really creating a native Oklahoma landscape, a real respite from the city, something unlike anything else in the city. And I think you know we're working with Myriad Gardens. They hopefully will be our operator, and we're making sure that we complement the kinds of programs and activities and character of Myriad Gardens. This is something different. They work well together. It's synergistic, and it leverages the opportunities of such a downtown park. And then lastly, I want to mention the Union Station and the fact that Union Station is very much a focus of this plan. It's a real jewel, and it's very important that it be thought of as part of the park and incorporated into the park, which we have done. So this is chronicling some of the assets of the park, the size of the upper park, the fact that it has 15 unique destinations within it. We anticipate, at a conservative estimate, over 500,000 people a year. And you see how the park breaks down in terms of geography, and you can see that it's mostly about landscape, as is appropriate for the lungs of the city, as we like to call such a large park in a city. The bar graph on the lower left-hand corner shows we got over 2,000 public responses as we went through a lengthy public process, and these are the responses we got of things people wanted to see in the park. And it was interesting to us to see how high up on that list nature was, and natural areas and landscape and shade and performances and events, education and interpretation, and special features like play and fountains. So we really use that as a benchmark every step of the way. So these are renderings to give you a sense of what I just described verbally. This is the boulevard. The cafe is in the distance on the right, the urban gardens in the foreground, and to the left is the Great Lawn, the big oval. And you can see a lively atmosphere of games, food and beverage, and urban landscapes. The buildings, please note, the buildings are as much about shade as they are about interior architecture, and I'll come back to that. But it's really important to think of them as beacons, and you see in this image that's at night as well as during the day. It needs to be highly lit. This is as if you were crossing from Harvey on this mid-block crossing, and the outdoor cafe is very much a beacon at night with an outdoor fireplace. So from the Great Lawn, looking toward downtown, a kind of amazing vista, a really unique opportunity for such a open space asset in the middle of a growing, burgeoning city urban core. The Civic Fountain on Robinson will be a gateway as you approach and cross the bridge over I-40 on Robinson. And adjacent is a children's play area, so you see where little kids can play where the jets are small, and in the distance you see the larger jets, and you see how that relates to the incline up to Skydance Bridge. And on the right, you can see Union Station. This is that promenade. This is the interactive fountain on your left, play area and lake on your right. And these light fixtures are designed by the artist Jamie Carpenter, and they will cast light at night and refract light during the day. And they'll go all the way from the corner of Robinson to the river. So they will be a real marker of progression. This is a view from up above I-40 and the Robinson intersection, and you're looking across the Robinson Gardens with a major gathering space there for weddings, etc., the promenade, the Civic Fountain, the lake, the boathouse, the children's play area, and in the background, the great oval lawn, the cafe, and the stage, and the city skyline. So it's an amazing opportunity to create such a large and diverse park. Again, this view down at eye level, almost from the same place, but at eye level. Now, this is one of the real secrets of the park in a way. This is the Woodland Garden Trail. So you'll be able to weave through the park underneath these big canopy trees and come to these various gardens, some of which will be open and grassy with play mounds for kids, some of which will be actually doing a job for us and collecting stormwater runoff on the site before putting it in the lake, and then from the lake using it for the irrigation on the site. So it's a very sustainable design and one that brings back a native landscape that maybe used to exist on this site. So from that same mound on the Great Lawn, looking toward Union Station and toward Skydance Bridge and over the lake. The boathouse is a real unique attraction as well as the cafe. This one's more casual, if you will. You can imagine hot dogs and a beer on Friday evening, renting a boat, being on the water, or from that deck. Again, this is as much about the shade structure and the deck as it is about an interior space, looking across the length of the lake, making it look as big as we can, to Union Station on the right and Skydance Bridge in the background. And Union Station, to take that space and make it a public amenity. There's great interest in restaurants in here as well as other users who could be park supporting kinds of users. So recreation focused. You can imagine weddings here quite a bit. This is the exterior space that is right now a car space. To convert what is a car space into a people space, you can imagine Sunday afternoon brunch, looking out over the lake and the woodland gardens being a major destination in the park. So we have to think about how people use the park on a day-to-day basis, to make sure there are restrooms distributed throughout the park, to make sure there's food and beverage distributed throughout the park, and other things like bicycles and tables and chairs, and where the food trucks can park on Robinson, and where we can create a real food truck court on Robinson, and then the stage and how the stage can be used day-to-day in the cafe and Union Station. So that's day-to-day. On market days, Robinson is seen as a very important edge to the park because that's where the food trucks can park, that's where we can have shade structures, that's where market booths and tents can set up, and it can be a real hub of activity all along the Market Street edge. And still the cafe, the boathouse, and Union Station complementing that. Then we worked with various event organizers to look at the way the park should be designed to best support events. And those events could be small-ish, 1,500 people, and that's a sort of one-day event that doesn't really impact streets. It could be 15,000 people in a day, which does have some impact to Robinson because the Robinson Street edge becomes the staging edge for these events. It becomes the place where support is defined and where food trucks, et cetera, line up. And then, of course, there's the big event. This is actually taking the Arts Festival and laying it out on the site and seeing how it could work on the site in the future. And they're quite excited about that. It will be many years before that happens, but it could happen here quite well. It closes the boulevard in total in this zone between Hudson and Robinson, and it closes Robinson halfway. But there are still 2 lanes open on Robinson, so it still continues to function. But again, that Robinson Street edge becomes a very important spine of activity of moving from arts booths to food booths to performance venues back and forth. We have been, Hans Butzer, I think you heard from Hans last time, Butzer Architects are designing the structures in the park. They are distributed throughout the park. They are based on vernacular Oklahoma architecture models, so they speak very much to Oklahoma and the idea of these sort of places that people will come to the prairie and establish these sort of vertical structures, these tent-like structures on the prairie. So they look to those for clues. All of these are small, and again, as much about outdoor space as they are about indoor space. Together, they total just over, I think, 12,000 or 10,000 square feet, something like that, just under 15,000 square feet. We are also looking at other structures in the park. Myriad Gardens came to us and said, you need more places for weddings, so because they get so much wedding business in Myriad. So we are designing a couple of beautiful sort of trellis structures that we can plant that will be perfect for setting up weddings with views over the lake and into the woodlands. And these are the shade structures on Robinson where the food trucks will line up. And this is where the patrons will be able to buy food from the food trucks and sit under the shade structures and enjoy the pleasant evenings Oklahoma City. And then also moving down Robinson, this is another structure we're looking at right now that will be a shade pavilion that will be up all the time. It will be a perfect venue for roller skating in the summer, our large weddings, our small performances. So this will also be along that Robinson Edge. So the Robinson Edge will have a series of structures, all of which are as much about shade as anything else, but that can incorporate, are designed to incorporate different kinds of activities and destinations. So just quickly, this is the Boulevard streetscape, and the cafe being a part of the Boulevard. We had as a part of our team, HRNA, economic experts on parks specifically, how to make parks be revenue generating and how to make parks succeed, and they were very clear that the cafe needed to be on the Boulevard to succeed. And we are talking with potential cafe and restaurant operators. We want to be sure we're designing something that actually will attract an operator and will bring revenue to the park. Then on Robinson, this corridor being the market corridor, if you will, the festival corridor, the food truck edge, and structures that are all about shade, and the major piece of art at the corner of Robinson and the Boulevard. Yet to be selected, by the way. That's just a placeholder. So now I wanted to dive into the specific issues related to the Exchange Building, because we did a lot of analysis of this issue when we started design in 2012. And this shows you the scale of the Exchange Building. So we just took that rendering and we dropped the Exchange Building into our aerial perspective, as you see here. And I'll show you some of the specifics of that impact. You see it in plan here, and you see that it is very much a part of this Robinson Street edge that is set up to host festivals, markets, etc. And what you really see is the curb will be moving on Robinson Street. And in order to have bike lanes, et cetera, on Robinson Street, the curb moves west. And if Film Exchange were to stay, we would have a 3.5-foot wide sidewalk there, and it would really not meet code. It would also be in the middle of the promenade. So that major Harvey Spine promenade that connects from the corner of Robinson and the Boulevard to Skydance Bridge would be severely impacted. So you see that in this view, and this is not a rendering so much as just a 3D model. This is looking toward downtown. This drops in the mass of the Film Exchange Building, and you see it doesn't really leave enough of the promenade for the promenade to work. It also impacts that sense of view. We want that visual connection from Skydance Bridge to downtown. So that's the whole idea of this park, is making that connection. So we want that visual connection, and this obviously impacts that visual connection. It also takes out some of the trees and some of the art lights. So some of those would have to be removed. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our efforts relative to buildings in the park, and also the fact that Union Station is very much, Brent's going to pass out some images, it's very important to us that Union Station be restored and be a part of the park, and the Myriad Gardens potential operators are saying the same thing. And our economic advisors, HRNA, while they counseled us that a cafe needed to be on the boulevard, they also counseled us that Union Station had enormous potential for viable economic enterprises. So restaurant, beer garden, those are the kinds of things that could definitely be a part of Union Station. So we really think that that's where the emphasis, that's all we can only spread our resources so far. There are only so many potential users of such a historic structure, and we think that Union Station is the jewel where that emphasis should go. It's important also to look at a little bit of the history of the planning of the site. It started with the I-40 mitigation study in 2001, which did not envision saving any buildings on the site except Union Station. That continued through the Quarter Shore planning, 2006 to 2007, which also did not envision saving any of the buildings except Union Station on the site. And then the conceptual planning that was done for the MAPS vote in 2009 presented a concept for the MAPS vote that looked at this piece of property as a park with only Union Station remaining as a building, as a jewel in this park. Then when we were hired in 2012 to further that design, we stepped back. We looked at all the buildings on the site again, just to be sure we were headed in the right direction. We had structural engineers look at all the buildings, including Film Exchange. We had developers look at all the buildings, including Film Exchange. They did not see much potential in developing Film Exchange, and they saw a pretty high price point for making it tenant-ready. It lacks a lot of support that such a building would need, like parking, for instance. That we also hosted 27 people who toured the Film Exchange building, representing a dozen cultural institutions, cultural groups, arts groups, none of whom saw any potential for using Film Exchange, all of whom saw great potential for being in Union Station. So at the end of that process, they were really focusing their efforts toward Union Station. We then called for a 90-day period for development proposals to come forward for Film Exchange. That 90-day period turned into 18 months, a year and a half. And during that time, no viable proposals came forward for Film Exchange with any kind of financial backing or plan or strategy. In addition, there are limitations to what can be done with Film Exchange because of the condemnation process and because of the MAPS funding. So if I could, I'd like to turn to Amanda to fill you in a little bit more on that because she's the expert.
Hi, Amanda Carpenter with the City Attorney's Office. The property Film Exchange building was acquired from J2 Corporation in 2012. The petition for the condemnation was filed in October of 2011. We went through the condemnation process. Commissioner's award was deposited in February of 2012. At that point in time, the City of Oklahoma City has legal possession of the Film Exchange building. The money that was used to purchase that property was City Capital Improvement Funds, also known as MAPS funds. This property, because it was acquired through condemnation, must be used for the public purpose for which it was acquired or another public purpose. It also must be used by the City of Oklahoma City. If it's not used for the public purpose for which it was acquired or another public purpose by the City of Oklahoma City, then it must be offered up to the original owners, J2 Corporation, for the price that was either it was purchased from, which that price was $979,000, or the fair market value, whichever is less. They get the first opportunity to purchase it back. The other restriction is that because MAPS funds were used, MAPS funds are a special sales tax. They follow, it means that when you use those funds, there's a specific use that has to accompany those funds. So this property has to be maintained by the city or one of its public trusts because the ordinance requiring the use of city capital improvement funds requires that it be maintained by the city or one of its public trusts. Those are the two restrictions on this property and the reason that those restrictions exist.
So in our minds, one of the worst things that could possibly happen is for the Film Exchange building to remain on the site and be empty and boarded up, and the park to be built around it in some way. And it would be that would be a really impactful decision to the park, to the success of the park. I think the park would have a hard time succeeding with a boarded up, empty building in it. And we're really concerned about that possibility. We've seen that in other places in the country, and it really is a problem. So I think that maybe the last thing to point out is that we were before City Council earlier this month. There was discussion of this issue. It was not taken lightly, but it did pass City Council with the removal of the Film Exchange building. And I have to quote the mayor at the end who said to me, "Mary Margaret, tell them to get after it. It's been too long. We need to build this park." So I just want to assure you that we thought a lot about this topic. We think that the opportunity of this great civic space is unparalleled in the country and one that we've thought very carefully about and hope that you will support today. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the committee for Mary Margaret?
If you could talk briefly to other than time and effort, what would be entailed should this building stay in a redesign of the park to accommodate this building?
Well, we'd have to start from scratch to some degree, because that edge is designed very specifically for a visual connection and for a flow continuity that Film Exchange would be in the middle of. So we would have to reassess. I really can't say exactly how it would look or how it would be different, but it would be significantly different than what we have today.
What's the overall budget of the park, if I may ask?
85 million? Overall, 85 million. That's upper and lower parks.
I have a question. Are there any kind of maintenance buildings or space allocated for the park itself in the park?
Union Station has great back of house assets. You know, the front of Union Station is the historic part,
Right.
and the back part is not historic and has great sort of loading dock access. And you can imagine bicycle repair shops, you can imagine yoga studios, and you can imagine park support and maintenance
Support.
back there in that part. Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. I just wanted to hear that. Thank you. So it looks like the total building square footage, correct me on this, is right now with the new builds is between 13 and 14,000 square feet.
That's
and
right.
the Film Exchange building itself is over 16,000 feet.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that's already twice that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
larger than what is
Exactly.
planned to even be.
I can't
built.
imagine how that much square footage that's totally enclosed could actually be used in a way that would be supportive and activating of the park. Those 13,000 to 14,000 square feet include the outdoor spaces. So it really is a matter of indoor-outdoor relationships that the Film Exchange building just doesn't have.
Which is the one thing that I love about the park design is just the shade that you've created in the outdoor structures are
They're key.
right on. They're key for our climate. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I'd just like to make a few comments. I mean, first of all, as everybody in the audience knows, we've been in a position of some pain regarding taking down what some consider historic buildings or older buildings or buildings that people think have some place of history or need to be preserved in the fabric of the city. And I think we've all been involved in some of those projects and take this fairly seriously. It is a struggle, but I think that, as you said, I don't think these other committees and bodies, the MAPS group, the city council, whatever, take it lightly either. So I can't stand in the way of this deal. I mean, I don't particularly think they're iconic structures. I think just because something old doesn't necessarily mean it's historic. I think the ownership presents a real problem to try to do something else. Having done some of these buildings, I know that it's extraordinarily expensive to renovate, and I'm guessing it's a $10 million ride or more to do anything with those buildings. And frankly, I think the park's going to serve the greater good of Oklahoma City than these buildings. So every great city has a great park, and I love your design, and so I'm in favor of taking them down.
Let me reiterate what Chuck is saying. First of all, I'm a downtowner. I love the entire plan. I trust the planners. You've been through the gamut. You've studied it. I looked at the buildings. I think I did visit with them a while back, and they're a disaster. So just without the park, they should be taken down. There is no value to those buildings, and to retrofit it is impossible. And I love what's going on in downtown. I think the park is essential in the MAPS program. The people that were involved in the design that are very responsible, trust them. I love the city. It's been very, very good to me. So I would agree with Chuck 100%. The title business, knowing it, the use and purpose, even is a further complication, but just on economics alone, they should be taken down. When you consider the plan that you guys came up with and spent all this time on, there's just no doubt that it's going to be a phenomenal park, and that would stand in the way, both buildings. So I would make that motion as long as we hear from the audience or your process. But
Right, we're still going to, we
Take
do
that
have some
from other-
audience members, I think, that we need to have speak. So
Absolutely,
we'll
let's
follow
have
our
some more discussion, but,
process. I just did want to mention for the record that I've personally visited the building, and I think other members have visited the building. Mr. Bates, we all have made physical visits to the building. I do have to say that I think that, going through your process, this has been quite well vetted by many groups and, in our city along the way for many, many years. It certainly has been looked at with ample time and ample public time. So now I think we do. If there are other questions or comments?
I'd just like to chime in. I'm extremely torn with this decision. Knowing the whole backstory and the history and all the planning that has gone into place, and seeing the plan of the park, it makes for a very tough decision because the Film Exchange building is significant. It is architecturally significant. It's a very good display of early 1900s commercial architecture in Oklahoma City. The exterior of the building is in very good condition. The brickwork is a very fine specimen of brickwork and is in good condition. The building is structurally sound. The plan for the park, looking at the overall plan, there's really nothing that jumps out at me that would be greatly impacted by keeping this building. There would be time and effort to go back and redesign around this building, but as far as the functionality of the park and the overall vision of the park, I think if this building were to stay, it would not negatively impact the park. Our guidelines state that, excuse me, there's an effort to preserve the legacy of our past, and any significant buildings should be rehabilitated. So starting with that premise, I don't see why this building should come down with that premise in mind. I also believe that visiting the building, the power station is on the east side of the road. I think having a permanent structure in place actually provides a buffer to the eyesore that is the power station from within the park. And then looking at the plan and talking about shelter, there's markets planned over there. My mind races with tons of possibilities for this building as far as a farmer's market, so I do think there is a side of the story that does grant this building the significance that it owns, and it makes for a very tough decision.
I agree, it is a difficult decision.
It is. And I just want to reiterate that there were 18 months to allow those kinds of proposals to come forward, and none did. And I think an empty building, boarded up building in the park would be a major detriment to the success of the park.
Okay. Any other comments? I think that there might be members of the audience that would like to speak. If so, would you come forward, identify yourself? Any comments from the gallery at all? Anyone else that would like to speak to this question? Any further questions from the committee? Okay. Hearing none, I will call for the vote. I'll call for a motion, if someone would.
Move to approve the demolition of the structure.
Okay, I have a motion, and we need to take them individually. So, gentlemen, if you would refer to the first one on our
623 South Robinson. I'm sorry, 523 South Robinson.
Okay. This is case item number 6B, 523 South Robinson. We have a motion to approve, and we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have 3 ayes and 1 nay, so the motion passes. We now have the other building, item 6C. Would you anyone like to speak to that building?
Yes, ma'am. David Todd again with MAP's office. This is the building that is directly north of the Film Exchange building that we talked about. This building is dilapidated. It's unsafe. It's a timber structure that has been boarded up, and we'd ask for an opportunity to demolish that one.
Any questions or comments about the 501 South Robinson building? Any comments from the audience about this building? Okay. Hearing no comments, I will call for a motion.
Move to approve the demolition of 501 South Robinson.
Second.
I have a Tannenbaum Ainsworth motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion is unanimous and it is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think she sees. We will have a moment of rest for our chair to return. Thank you all very much. We did. Okay, so now we're on the next. We are on D, 828 West Main.
Applicant present. Please state your name.
Good morning. I'm Mark Tolson, Arrive Architecture Group. We're presenting the remaining 3 buildings on the residences today. Last month we presented Building C, which is on Sheridan. Today we're presenting our yes, I would like to drive. We're presenting the other 3 buildings. As you can see from our site plan, Building C was approved on West Sheridan last month. We're talking about Building A, Building B, and Building D. So I'd like to kind of walk you through those quickly. You know the program, market rate high-end apartments around the 21C Museum Hotel, the music venue. It's the same stuff, just we tried to design each building with its own character, its own sort of theme as we went through it. So I'll just kind of walk you through those quickly. So D is our anchor building on Sheridan. It's our clubhouse building. It also contains a restaurant space. So our clubhouse anchors along Fred Jones Avenue on the western side of that building. The south side is a restaurant space. Lots and lots and lots of people wanting that restaurant space, so we're very excited about that. Then the building sits on its own parking, 2-story concrete parking podium. And so we're just really excited. We've got some paseo, some walks that connect to Sheridan. We've added on-street parking per the 180 plan. So this building is just a dream for us. We like this building. The clubhouse is 3 stories and has a fitness center on the 3rd level. It's about 12,000 square feet. And the 3rd level is a fitness area like I talked about with a courtyard next to it for yoga and prep like that. Then on top of that is a pool on the 4th floor. We call it our Vegas style pool. It's about 18 inches deep, but it's very fun and showy, and we're excited about that. The outside of the building is modern and uses Nichia panels, some metal panels on the corner. That corner was a very specific design that the ownership very much wanted, so we sort of added that feature. It enlivens that corner. It really activates. It's the center of everything we do, creates the energy on Fred Jones. You can see the elevations, and we're still we're just really excited. This top one, the east, which is actually looking east, is the clubhouse. You can see the pool on the upper level with glass rails, clubhouse in that area. This one looking south is our north elevation. Then you can see the other elevations that are here. So we're just really excited about this building. It has...
Mark,
Yes, ma'am.
Could you go back to that slide and just go through all of the various materials?
Yes,
just so we
ma'am.
can-
Figure this out. There we go. So I'll go back. So the blue is the Nichia panel. So that's a cementitious panel in a frame. It's the same price as brick, so it's very expensive. The buff color is brick, and this on the lower levels, like these materials. This silver around the corner here is metal panel, and then all the back sides, this buff, blue, and gray are Hardie panel or Hardie siding. So we brought material boards to show the color. So we're pushing for more color, but we'll see. So everyone's excited about the blue, but we're very excited. So this building has a lot of materials on it, but we're excited about breaking it up. So great. Building B is probably everybody's favorite building on the whole campus. It has live-work units, which everybody's really excited about. It's directly across from the hotel, and it has about 1,200 square foot live-work units. They have a first-floor space for a lawyer, a CPA, even a florist, stairs going up, and then living space above that. There's 4 of them, so we think they're going to be sold out before we even start, so we're just really excited about that. There's a parking podium there, parks itself, 31 spaces. There's a central elevator, then there's units, fairly large units above, there's a balcony that runs the entire length of Fred Jones, kind of continuing that clubhouse feel, puts people onto Fred Jones. And so we're just really excited about that building. It's just kind of a fun building. As you can see from the elevations that face east have pitch roofs with higher windows that look downtown, so that should be a really nice feature. And that building, again, has a combination of the metal panel, the Nichia panel, the brick, and siding on it. And we orient our garage to Main. We take some of that storefront and we wrap around Main a little bit just to kind of keep some continuation there. We couldn't enter onto the alleyway. This side over here, it's too small for traffic to come on there, so we had to go out to Main Street. So that is this elevation right here. That's the entrance on Main. So that's just a fun building. Building A is our problem child. It's had the most interesting thing, but I think it'll probably end up being our favorite building when it's all done in a lot of ways. We determined early on, we had 2 buildings here, and we talked about it last time, we decided to close Fred Jones, so that process is in play, and that's been a good discussion with our neighbors. It's still going on, lots of interesting things. We had to dig out of the building here to get a turn, so all that is in process, and we're just really excited about this building now. So essentially we have a parking garage in the middle, a very large office retail space, storefront glazing all along Classen and Main Street. We've got a retail space along Main Street on this side, our lobby here, a water feature that we're working on here to sort of anchor this view down Main Street. And then we tried to orient as many units not looking north toward the jail as possible. So even though we hope the jail will go away at some point, we really don't want to look at the jail. So that's kind of how this building, there's residential units above. There's this little courtyard here on the ground level is a dog park, an enclosed dog park for these folks. We have a dog park down on building C, but we wanted one closer. So we kind of walk through the building, parking garage, everybody parks on their own level. They're able to get into their units. So this is just one sort of concept artist view of maybe what that water wall would look like. We're still in process on that, but this is kind of the thought. Early on, some comments came in that we want to make sure the building looked different on each side. So we've been very clear to have a sort of a more urban feel like the rest of our campus on this side. This side is more brick, more industrial, looking similar to the hotel. The garage in the middle. We've got storefront glazing here on the lower levels of this garage, this first floor, with railings, open railings on the top. So it's definitely more industrial building. It definitely works with a hotel. And we're hoping that we've had lots of interest in this space here being a compatible use of the hotel and to the office space next door. So this is the east elevation looking downtown. This is the north. Again, we just don't have any windows looking that way, so it looks we've got tall, high windows, so we're not looking at the jail. So that's just the reality of where we're placed on in the world. And so we're excited to bring it to you today, and I can answer questions, have material boards here, and ownership is here if you have technical questions too for them. Thank you.
Do you know how the height of building A relates to the height of the Fred Jones building?
The height of Building A related to, the height of Building A is 5 stories. So the Fred Jones building is 4 stories and a bit, so it's 10 or 15 feet higher than Fred Jones. Not significantly higher, though, and that's why we kept this brick edge very similar here, to kind of feel that. We're probably a story, maybe, I mean, there's a lot of parapet on Fred Jones, but we're about a story taller than they are.
The only comment I would have is in relation to this elevation and specifically the parking garage. I don't have any issue with the false storefront that is provided as the envelope for the parking garage. My focus actually comes more to the precast panels that are above the brick. And I think we talked about it briefly when we reviewed Building C and the parking garage. I think as straight precast, those can be very brutal elements. And introducing some line work and some false joints within those panels would help break down those elements and blend more with the way the overall elevation and their elements are broken down.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, and we want to do that. So we've initiated core slab design in the garage on this building. We haven't gotten those details back, but yeah, we looked at C last time, and there actually are a lot of good joints. We have in our budget to paint that entire thing with a good finish, so it just won't be just regular panels. So we can even force some of those joints in with the paint. So yeah, that garage the hotel people are very interested in the way that garage looks. They're with you. So.
I have a quick question on, I think it's Building B. You mentioned that you had to exit onto Main Street. It would be so much better if you could arrange exiting onto the alley. And I know you...
I'm with you. I'm with you. The concern was that we have our Building D exiting onto the alleyway, and the alley's only 16 feet wide, and it's one way. And that's the only way that building can go, because we didn't want that building, it couldn't exit through the restaurant down to Sheridan. So we went up north, and that's purely just a traffic operations issue. So we worked at the facade, as you can see the facade, we worked, back up. We really tried to take the storefront on this side of the facade. This unit actually swings around this side, wraps the corner, so they actually have kind of this whole corner of this live work. So we really tried to kind of minimize the garage onto Main, but it was just a functional trap. I mean, the civil engineer says just too many people going on that alleyway. You're just going to create lots of problems. So this was the easier building to exit north versus the other building, which would mess up. We'd have to go through our restaurant.
Are you going to have to get a variance for that exit,
No.
that distance from the corner? Yeah, I'd really like to see that be, the walkability, the impact on the walkability seems to be not great. Just a comment. Any other comments or questions? Anybody want to speak to this from the audience? Mike, your name is on everything. You want to? No? Okay. Do we want to make a motion? He did the whole meeting
I
last
appreciate all of the planning for this community. I mean, it's really going to be well thought out and a multi-use, so welcome them to the neighborhood. It's a perfect use of Fred Jones Boulevard and the new hotel. The jail, that's another story, and who knows, but I think they treated it correctly because you just don't know. Politics and the federal government and county commissioners, who the heck knows what's going to happen, but tremendous amount of planning. I mean, every corner, every perspective has been carefully detailed with. I like your suggestions, I like Betsy's suggestions, but overall, I would move to approve the demolition of the parking lot and the, I think it's just per building, is that how we're going to do this?
Let's see. Yes.
Okay, I approve the demolition of the parking lot and the construction of 828 Main as per the plan.
Got a motion and a second to approve the plan. Now, anytime you want to make any of those changes, you can always come back and we'll reconsider it, right?
No fee, we won't charge.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, you want to take the next one? I figure we could just go right through.
Yeah,
all three
ditto
buildings.
on 913 Main Street. Move to approve.
That's a Corey second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. And on F.
Move to approve 835 West Sheridan.
Gigi seconded that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. You are approved, and we're very excited to see this start going up. It's great. Well, it's excitement, energy down at that part of that west side of Main Street. Okay, the next item is 11 and 16 North Robinson. Is the applicant present? Can you come forth, tell us your name, write it on a little piece of paper in front of you?
It's Larry Wooten. Is my address, or the address that, is it my address or the,
Your address.
okay. Business address is 8305 Southwest 3rd, Suite 102, Oklahoma City, 73128.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You want to tell us about your project?
I'm proposing a sign for Nick's, and there's an existing billboard that's there, and we're wanting to use the billboard as the sign. It's a double-sided sign, and it will be illuminated with, the letters will be illuminated with LED, and all of that would be painted, the structure would be painted. And the address is going to have the 1116 South Robinson on it.
Laura, can you recap the issues as we saw it with what the applicant wants to do?
Good morning. Laura Griggs, Planning Department. This is up at the intersection of Robinson and Broadway Circle. We don't know how long this sign frame has been there, but it has been there a significant amount of time. In your staff report, you saw a whole bunch of citations. There's a whole bunch of different sign regulations that came into play with this one. In this design district, we're looking for the monument signs, shorter, smaller signs, pedestrian-oriented, not vehicular-oriented. Obviously, the pole signs are meant to be seen from a roadway traveling at high rate of speeds. Since this sign has been there a while, we were trying to figure out where this fit in.
the permitting department, we had discussions with them about how they would look at signs, because they have to issue permits for signs. And in the case of what was proposed for Nick's Restaurant, since it would be advertising a restaurant, a business that takes place there, it's considered an accessory sign. So in this district, the maximum height of that sign obviously is not 30 feet tall, it's significantly less. And as stated in the report, the maximum size they're allowed to have is 70.5 square feet, and that's based on the size of the lot. And this sign is 218% larger than what they're allowed to have per the current code. The sign they're supposed to provide is a ground sign. In that definition, the base is at least half the width of the size of the sign, and obviously a pole sign does not meet that definition. As well as I said, their maximum height is 8 foot. This one is about 30 feet, so it's 375% taller than the sign that would be allowed today. We can't find, as I said, any information about when this sign was installed. I traced it back. It's been at least 7 years since there was anything on the sign. With pictures, I think it could have been longer than that, that it has been sitting there without a face on it. We were looking at what are our options? Is this frame allowed to remain? And the best that we could tell from looking at all of our regulations, because structurally there's nothing wrong with it. It could handle a new face. It just doesn't meet any of our regulations today. So the way we were looking at it is it would be allowed to remain even if you all were not to approve this. There is obviously...
They just can't put anything on it. Is that...
Unless they get approved.
Okay.
Obviously, there's several variances that they would need. They had to start here. They have, the application has not been submitted yet for the variances. I spoke with Nick, and I apologize because I don't remember his last name, early on in this process and haven't spoken with him lately. So I know that his intention was to apply for a variance. I don't know the timing of that, or if he was waiting to see what happened with this one. As you know, you all do make recommendations to the Board of Adjustment if somebody has to apply for a variance. There is another similar sign around the corner, just about a block away up at the Shell station, but it is being used as a non-accessory sign advertising businesses that don't take place there. It's about the same age as this, about the same size. So we do have some of these older, to me, they're smaller than your typical billboards you see today, and they're a little shorter in height because most of them are much taller that are out there on the interstate. We have some, they're slowly disappearing, I think, which is the intent of our regulations, to eventually have pedestrian-friendly, pedestrian-oriented signage in these areas.
The only thing I would add is my interpretation of it is that it's lost its non-conforming use because it's been abandoned for more than 2 years. So I think that we could make him remove complete structure.
Kind of sympathize with the owner. However, I've had a little experience with accessory and non-accessory signs. And as an accessory sign, it doesn't meet any of the requirements, and I would not be in favor of approving it, besides it being kind of an eyesore given the urbanality that we're trying to achieve. But it's illegal as an accessory sign. Non-accessory, that's another whole issue, and I'm not sure that ODOT or anybody else, the sign ordinance would permit it also. You know, a lot of things since we came aboard got grandfathered in, and this is one of them.
If I could, this type of sign, non-accessory sign, this type of sign is not a permitted use in this district.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
At all.
Who knows when it was put up and why and how, you know.
A long time ago, obviously.
Yeah, I found phone lines on.
I'm sorry. In this zoning district, non-accessory signs are not permitted so billboard signs. If someone came in to propose this today as a new sign, it's not allowed as a use.
Okay, anybody else want to comment?
I kind of echo what Dick said. First of all, I love Nick's, and I'm really excited that they're coming down there. I mean, it's one of my favorite places in town, and frankly, I don't think Nick needs a sign. I mean, you can't get into his place right now.
Okay, so they're not going to be at 1201?
Yes.
No, this is the second location, I think.
This is an additional
Yeah.
location. He's not closing his original one.
So having said that, I think we need a smaller sign if he's going to have a sign, a legal one. And like I say, I mean, I don't think he needs a sign, period, based on his product. But I agree with Dick. So I also agree with deny.
Well, this is a great example of what we are supposed to be here for. And it's a design review, and it's to look at the aesthetics of the area, and a billboard of any kind is not aesthetically pleasing. So
I concur as well. I think if this would be approved, we would be moving in the wrong direction that we're looking to move in, and an approval of this would further limit any future decisions to get us in the direction we want to go.
Madam Chairman, I move to deny, first time in 8 years. Or however long I've- yeah.
That's impressive.
So unfortunately,
Sorry.
and I'm sure they'll come up with the appropriate accessory sign to promote the business.
Okay.
I move to
second.
deny, and I move to deny any recommendation to the Board of Adjustment.
We have a motion and a second. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this? Would you like to respond to any of?
Actually, to be honest with you, I'm in agreement with you guys, because that is an eyesore. I just do the signs.
Okay. All right, that's good. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you for being here, and thank you for your candid
Okay,
opinion.
just to
Yeah.
clarify, do they need to separately for the, in case he, can he still file for the Board of Adjustment?
He,
I denied our recommendation.
no, he could, but he wouldn't have this approval, so.
Well, I just didn't know if they needed to,
No, actually,
this motion would take care of it.
And Dick did include any variance in his recommendation for a denial of any variance that would come up.
right, if variance paperwork was filed, it would need to actually come back, because then we would know the specifics of what they're asking.
I'd like to ask a question. Since that's most likely coming down, the size of that sign and the type of sign it is, the base of that sign would hold an approved pole sign. Is it okay to use that as a base to, if he's allowed a pole sign?
Pole signs are not allowed.
Oh, okay.
That's part of the issue.
Right.
Okay. It needs to be a monument sign.
Okay. I was just thinking of the size, that it was being denied because of the size.
Part of it's the height. It's
Right.
not allowed to be that high, and it's not allowed to be a pole sign, and it's not allowed to be that big, so.
Okay. Thank you.
If I might, we actually have a representative here of the very first case, right? That they weren't here when we got to it earlier.
We ready to move on to that? Thank you very much. That would be item A. And that is 800, no, sorry. That is 601 Robert S. Kerr. Could you please state your name and write it? You're already writing it on there, so great. Hi, Jeremy.
How are you? Jeremy Gardner with Gardner Architects, 401 Northwest 23rd. We are back this month to, I think, make some clarifications that I think Connie took issue with last month. And that was primarily just to add more detail in terms of the landscape plan. for the site. I think all the other issues with the project have been vetted in the past, but I think today we just wanted to clarify a few things and species of trees, things of that nature on the landscape plan. So I don't know if we've had a landscape architect kind of take a look at it and make some specific species recommendations, as well as some of the details that would kind of coincide with those that implementation. So if you guys have any questions about that specifically.
Any comments, questions? Connie is not here. Anybody out there want to speak to this? Do we have a motion? Now this has become Dick's job, guys. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much for coming back.
You bet.
Good luck. We have a couple of presentations. There is a pedestrian plaza presentation. This is pretty exciting. What's your name?
Good morning. That's my name. Eric Winger, Public Works Director for Oklahoma City. Pleased to present to you today the Pedestrian Plaza project, which is one of the final Project 180 programmed projects that, obviously a program that began a number of years ago, and hopefully you've seen quite a bit of success with the streetscapes, but not to forget there were a number of park projects that are also included, that included the Mary Botanical Gardens, Bicentennial Park, and then also now the last of the parks, the Pedestrian Plaza. So this is a project that's being designed by Howard Fairbairn Site Design and also Marassi and Associates. And so we're at the preliminary report stage today, and so we're presenting today to come back to you next month for your approval. As we look at the project limit map, what you see here is the area in blue is the areas that are planned to be improved as a part of the Pedestrian Plaza. On the top of this drawing is Park Avenue. On the right-hand side is Robinson. On the bottom, we've got the IRS building that you can see in the lower right, which is the white building. And then on the left, we have Harvey. The total site is just under a half of an acre. And I think for many that are probably in the downtown area, this is also known as Raven Park, or portions of it have the Raven statue that are here just off of Robinson Avenue. Looking at the detailed site plan, now we've rotated the drawing. North is to the right, so you can clearly now see Park, Robinson, and Harvey, but north is to the right. You're going to see a new landscape design. You're going to see a new hardscape. You're going to see a number of elements that also include some boulders and some water features. So it's really a comprehensive remodel of the existing areas to really make them a lot more pedestrian friendly and inviting. Obviously a lot of area buildings that are going to be affected at the top. You see, and it's in very light print, but it's the east parking garage. Of course, we've got the Robinson Renaissance buildings. We've got the Oklahoma Tower, corporate tower, and then the IRS now is on the lower left. So as we show a few of the renderings, I think some of the other details will become a little more apparent. So looking at this first rendering, this is the view looking north towards Oklahoma Tower. So things that you can see on the left-hand side, you can see some of the new seat walls that will provide some opportunities for people to actually stay within the park and have an opportunity to want to be there. You're going to see a number of new landscaping items, and so you look at a lot of the new trees and some of the ground covers that are there. But again, one of the biggest items and one of the goals is to make this just a more pedestrian-friendly area that is not necessarily part of that today. Looking at this next rendering, this is looking west between Corporate Tower and the Robinson Renaissance. Again, you're starting to see some of those smaller boulders being placed and some of these natural rock forms. There is a mixture of natural rock and man-made rock, and I'll point out a few of those here in just a minute. But again, you're going to see some of those seat walls. What we're also starting to see in this area, so this particular area has some dumpsters and some trash cans, some things. The private business owners are also participating in the project, and they're relocating those below grade and into some of the loading dock areas. And so there's a lot of partnering just from the public part of the project, but also the private owners of the buildings surrounding. As we move over to this view, this is looking east from Harvey. So we're looking towards that East Center Garage. You're starting to see some of the man-made rock forms. One of the things that's obviously central that you can see is these new granite berms. And these are small granite pavers that are then made into these larger rock shapes. I mean, obviously some of the natural rock cannot be found in those sizes, but they're bringing some of those details forward. You also see some of the Project 180 details that are also shown in this drawing, which is the amenity zones with the trees and the tree wells and the pavers that are throughout the downtown area, a lot of those details have been brought into the park as well. So you're going to see a lot of complementary design function where we're actually bringing the public space further into the park, but then also being wrapped into some of the private improvements as well. This is the area coming in off of Robinson, off of Main Street, looking north, and this is the more of the proper area that we probably see where the Raven normally sits in the statue. It is the one piece of art that's in the project. The owner is in discussions with relocating that within the park, so it's being retained. There's also 6 of the historic, or I should say some of the larger oak trees that are in that area that are also being retained as a part of the project. So it is not a complete scrape of the park. It actually is retaining as much as possible and then adding a lot of these new features. One of the biggest water features you can kind of see in the background are some natural rock forms that Marassi is working on the final designs for to create a really inviting opportunity in the center part of that park. The trees the stones that were selected for the water feature are about 13 to 14 feet in height, and so these are quite large. And you can see some of the scale with some of the figures that have been drawn in next to those shapes. And they weigh anywhere between 60 and 90 tons each. And so their placement in that park has been strategically identified on those areas that are at grade, because a lot of this park is over some existing lower parking and below ground spaces. So many improvements. And this last rendering that we'll show, a part of the park does include some on-street or some at-grade parking. It's going to be screened from the pedestrian area. Now, this is not the final design, but there is a perforated screen wall as a part of the final design to separate those parking spaces from the pedestrian spaces. And so this is really just an element that's not finalized, but something that will be completed in the next month. But again, making sure that we're creating that atmosphere again for an inviting pedestrian space. So again, as I mentioned this month, we're looking at introducing to you and can answer questions, of course. The project's total budget is about $3.1 million, and we're in the budget at this point. The construction is set, so upon your approval and the finalization of the plans, to begin construction in the spring of 16 and finish by the end of next year. So this will be one of the last projects of Project 180, with some of the final streetscapes being completed in the downtown area as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the pedestrian plaza.
I wanted to just thank you for bringing the 3D renderings. That really helps me understand, and probably everybody else understand, the scale of this. Because when you look at the plan, the park, the Raven Park, is really a nice urban park because it's got all that grass. And looking at the plan, it seems like, oh my gosh, all the grass is going away. But the rendering helps us see what the scale of that is. So I really appreciate you doing that.
And I think you'll see there's a lot of combination of hardscape and softscape. There was a lot of detail placed to a lot of the plantings, and because of the plantings being over some of those spaces that are structural beneath, they've had to use a lot of lightweight materials. So there may have been a goal to include a lot more treed and root-type bearing structures, but it's just not possible because of the underground spaces and the underground areas that are there. But they, again, have put the heavier rock formations, salvaged the existing trees, and maintained all of that, and then enhanced it with a lot of the other details that I shared today.
I live like a block away, and I work a block away, and I love the fact that you're using all of the kind of alleyways or parkways between the 5 different buildings. That's going to kind of make it a phenomenal urban amenity. And it is funded through Project 180.
It is. And it has been one of the original projects that was conceived when Project 80 began.
And you are going to finish part before you start this, I hope.
Yeah, the Project 180, has been well managed in the regard of having maintained its budgets. And so, yeah, the budget is available for this project to begin next year and finish next year.
I had one question. Around the IRS building, there are just ugly bollards that are in the ground, both on Robinson and in that side. Are those going away?
So there's the intent to remove those and replace those possibly with some rock forms or some other items. There are some standards that have to be met for that bollard
So
system.
that is a requirement of the IRS building?
It is, and just for other safety. So, for example, off of Robinson and where it tees in with Main Street, there have been some conversations just ensuring that a vehicle can't accidentally enter into the park if pedestrians are present. So some of the final design, you will see some of those elements, for safety, but again, mimic a lot of the materials that are in the park, meeting bollard standards and what's required.
The ones on Robinson are fine. It's those ugly ones on the north side of the IRS building. Those will go away.
So again, I would share with you that a lot of those are under review now. I don't have final drawings to show, but yeah, there is the intent to make it all consistent with the design that I'm showing you today.
Let's get it going.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it's a great plan. I'm familiar with the area as well, and everything looks really good. I have a couple questions, detailed questions, if I could. What's the plan for the existing Raven and Apple statue?
So I think I mentioned it's actually a privately owned piece of art. There's been cooperation and coordination between the project architects and the owner. The intent right now is to relocate it within the park.
And then the parking signs, the parking screens, the one rendering that you showed was the screen around the drive aisle that comes out of the east parking garage. Would the character of that screen be typical for any other screening elements within this project? There's the vent screen around the Renaissance building, and you had talked about some dumpster locations.
So the final detailing of this screen is not complete. What is conceived is a perforated metal type structure. Whether the art form on this is in circles or the final colors of that, that hasn't been finally determined. So that will be a part of that final plan that we can show next month. But it is identified as a space that's not just a wall, so it's not so opaque that it creates a hard edge, but to create a softer edge that then separates those two.
But there would be a consistency in the design and material of that screen, no matter which screening elements there are within the park.
I believe that's the intent.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then, lastly, it looks like there's a number of raised planters that are being established against existing buildings. Could you speak to what the plan is to deal with drainage?
So there is an irrigation and a system that's being designed by Howard Fairbairn Site Design. I don't have all of the details of that, but what I can share with you is in most of the raised planters, a lot of lightweight materials are being used for under-drain systems to be included. So I can just give you the assurance that that's being taken into account as a part of the design.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think the plan's great. I love it. I guess my question is, I'm on the Business Improvement District Board, and now we're kind of trying to figure out how to maintain some of this stuff. So where's the budget, and is the Parks Department going to ultimately take care and maintain these areas, Eric, or how's that going?
As each of these renovated parks has come online, we've come into different agreements with entities. So, for example, the Bicentennial Park is maintained by the city's Parks Department. However, the Muir Botanical Gardens is maintained by the Gardens Foundation. We are in discussions with this particular area, and since it's shared by so many private buildings, I would anticipate there's probably going to be a private partnership to do some of the maintenance in the area, but we don't have that finalized at this time.
And this is not pertaining to this particular project, but how about the park that was presented earlier? Is that going to be under the purview of the Parks Department, or?
I don't know that I was here at the first part of the... Oh, and sorry, so the MAPS 3 Central Park, discussions are underway with that park as well. So a final determination has not been made for the new MAPS 3 park, but there are ongoing discussions on how it to be best operated and maintained.
But, having been on the busy end of trying to figure some of this stuff out, I really hope we get some finite agreements on how it'll all work, because we've stubbed our toe a couple of times on it. But anyway.
I think the Mary Gardens Foundation has been a very positive concept, and we're seeing lots of great things, and it's not just maintenance of the park, but it's programming of the parks too. So there's a lot of things that go on, and I think you can expect some of the same, whether it be in this park, Bicentennial, which we're also starting to see some other things that are not just public presentations, but there's actual private rentals, and we're starting to hear some new interest in Bicentennial as well.
Yeah.
Revenue producing.
For example, one of the items, if you were following the city council meeting, was the relocation of the Arts Festival to the Bicentennial Park, which was the original home of the Arts Festival. So there are some pretty big things happening to some of these renovated parks, yes. Welcome.
Good question, Chuck. Thanks. And I know we're learning a lot as all of this continues to be built. And
yeah.
Anyway, thanks for presenting it. Very exciting. The next item is another exciting item. I assume this is related to the quiet zone.
Yes, I'm Brian Haskins with Oklahoma City Public Works. At this time, I'd like to invite Josh Risley with Cardinal Engineering. We're going to give you guys just a quick presentation about the overall quiet zone project, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions you guys may have. So, thank you.
All right, I'm Josh Risley, obviously with Cardinal.
Do you have?
All right. The Quiet Zone project encompasses 10 crossings between 16th and 23rd Street. The point of the modifications to the corridor is to meet the safety criteria for the FRA in order to establish a sealed railroad corridor. The idea behind it, in case you don't know this, is to allow the railroad, when going through downtown, to not have to blow its horn at every intersection. In order to accomplish this, a couple things are going to be done to be able to designate as a quiet zone. We're going to be doing modifications to signalizations and approaches at some of the intersections, as well as having to close several of the intersections in order to meet those requirements for the safety standards. Modifications for the signalization and approaches will be done at 16th, 13th, and then 10th through 7th. And then we're going to be closing 12th, 14th, Park Place, and 23rd. In order to help with people inappropriately crossing mid-block, which we're assuming happens quite a bit at some of the alleyways, in order to get across, we're going to be installing an 8-foot chain link fence along the railroad right-of-way at the locations that are identified. It's a little bit hard to see on the big screen, as well as going through the closed intersections themselves. If you could switch to the next sheet, please. All right. What you're looking at here is what we're going to be doing. Well, all right. This is 7th Street. The intersections that are specifically within the DDRC's area of interest will be 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, Park Place, 12th, and 13th. This is 7th Street. We're going to be installing 8-inch medians and then extending the 6-inch curbs on the sides of the roads up to the railroad in order to keep it as a closed system. We're also going to be improving the railroad signalization at the intersection itself. 8th Street, we're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be installing the 8-inch high medians in the middle, extending the 6-inch curbs on the sides up to the rail itself, improving the signalization, and also at the same time we're going to be maintaining the drive accesses that are for the close proximity businesses to the rail itself. 9th, again, same things, median, extending the 8-inch medians, 6-inch curbs, rail signalization, and we're also doing some improvements on an existing drainage structure that's up on the northwest corner of this portion in order to alleviate some drainage issues in the area. 10th Street, this one's a little bit different. We are still extending the 8-inch medians and improving the signalization, but we're also widening 10th to account for the additional traffic loads that we're going to be getting from some of the other roadway closings. Park Place, this is one of the intersections that we're going to be closing. We had the room to be able to put a turnaround on the west side of the connection there. So that's what you're looking at. 12th is also another one that's going to be closed, and will be a hammerhead turnaround into the parking there on the south side, as well as just blocking it off. The east side is going to be a standard barricade. And then finally, 13th, this one, we're extending the 8-inch medians and the 6-inch curb. Signalization did not need to be improved on this one. That's about it, so I'm open to questions.
So can you go back to 10th Street and talk about widening that street and talk about, are you adding lanes to it or?
That's going to be 4 lanes.
How is this funded?
Pardon me?
How is this being funded?
That's a great question.
Just curious, just saying.
We have several different sources. $2 million. Well, actually, the project will be, like Josh mentioned, there's actually 2 different components. We'll have the railway improvements, the signalization improvements, which we have an agreement with BNSF Railroad that will provide no more than $2 million of improvements for signalization. And then there's about $1.7 to $2 million that we're going to funds that are going to be used. And they're a combination of TIF funds, private donations, and just capital improvement funds that will be used to fund all of the, primarily to fund most of the surface improvements and to kick in whatever we have to do to match on the railroad. So.
When's it going to happen?
We're hoping probably in the next month to finalize the design, and we're working on some other issues with 14th Street, just looking at reconfiguration of the intersection, and hopefully by, if that's all cleared up and we have final plans by the end of October to present to council, we're looking to start construction conceivably by the end of the year, first of next year.
Right now, we're anticipating about 180 days.
180 working days.
6 months, 180 days.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to stage the, like, close 10th, but keep.
It's going to be, right now, we're planning on doing each intersection one at a time in order to
Right.
maintain
Okay.
flow.
Well, I think this is a great project. It's I think it's going to really help spur development up and down through there and create a much nicer place to be. I've listened to that train for 30 years.
Any other questions or comments?
Just one question. The chain link fence that borders the railroad in the mid-block, how far does that extend into the actual intersection?
At the intersections that we're closing, it will actually go all the way across that intersection. It's just a safety improvement that we're looking at, just to keep people from getting on the tracks. I mean, obviously, safety is the primary reason why this project is even going. I mean, of course, the train whistle is definitely a nuisance, but we definitely want to keep in consideration safety and putting that first, and that's definitely a consideration. All the crossings that will be permanently closed to keep not only a barrier, but just also another barrier for pedestrians and people that might wander onto the tracks.
And then at the intersections that you're not closing?
The ones that will remain open, the fence will terminate. That each one's a little bit different, depending on just the different site configurations at each of the crossings. But I mean, most of the time, the fence will terminate just short of the intersection, obviously, to keep a wide enough crossing. And a lot of it, too, that we haven't finalized on the fence is, we still have to come to an agreement with the railroad to the exact length configuration and make sure that everything that we're doing is something that they will approve and allow us to construct on their right-of-way.
Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Very exciting. Then moving along, I'm personally going to go through the administrative approval, because when I was reading it, it sounded like, especially 6.5 was a pretty interesting thing. Pretty long discussion on that. But anyway, the next meeting is October 15th. I hope we will see all of you there. We had applications submitted on the 15th.
We got applications. Yeah, did they submit? They said they were, but I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, there are cases.
So before I adjourn the meeting, any comments from the galley? No? Any other comments from the commission or from the staff? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.